being called a Paki when I was a kid, and how it still gives me a visceral reaction, and how it kind of shaped me a little bit. So that's where this all started. So we wanted to talk to you about any term that you were called, that you recollect, and it could be back then when you were younger, it could be in the past few years. Is there anything that stands out to you that's made an impact in your life?
Yeah, so I actually have two.
Okay,
is that all right?
Yeah,
one
absolutely.
when I was very little, and then one when I was a bit older. So I think the first memory I have of that kind of naming or labeling was in the schoolyard when I was really little. So I was 5 when I started kindergarten, 1958, and I can remember being called with a sneer, you're a girl. You can't play with us because you're a girl. And we had, in the school that I went to when I was in grade 7 and 8, we had boys' entrances and girls' entrances. When I was little at the school that I was at, there was a big field where the boys played, and then there was a field, or there was a tarmac where the girls played, and we were playing skipping. So there were girls' toys and there were boys' toys. There were girls' games and there were boys' games. So that separation really, it hit me. And I think part of the reason was I was the eldest of 4 girls. So in our family, we just did everything. My dad bought us trucks. We were his team. We played games, we played baseball, we ran, we did all those things. So that was really formative for me. And so I think throughout my whole life, that notion that somehow girls and boys couldn't do the same thing. The throwing like a girl ads, they make me weep, because it's so important to me that we level that playing field and we find a way. So whether we're talking about little girls being able to play games or, the minimum wage. I mean, the such a huge number of people who are earning minimum wage are women. And so increasing the minimum wage affects women's lives and brings them up. So that's the first one. The second one is later on when I came out, and so I had lived with all the privilege of being a white heterosexual woman, and there was the girl thing, but I'd had a lot of privilege as in that role. And when I came out, when I was 37, I can remember not long after that, walking in North Toronto and being yelled at across the street by some young boys calling me dyke. And I remember thinking, well, okay, I knew intellectually that could happen, but it really hit me when it happened, that I'd stepped into a different world, and that this hatred and this kind of vile behavior was what people had put up with who had been struggling with their sexuality their whole lives. My own partner, Jane, she knew that she was different when she was 6 years old. And so her whole life, she'd been living with that. Kids in the playground, kids in school, dealing with that. So it really went in, and it became for me just another layer of understanding of the work we have to do to make the world fairer for everybody.
And that happened when you were 37, but how did it shape you in the following years?
Well, immediately, as I was coming out, I was involved with the school board in developing policies, developing equity policies. In fact, as the Minister of Education, if I follow that thread through, it was really important to me that we have equity policies in place in our education system, because not just girls and lesbians and gay kids, but everyone needed to feel like everyone needs to feel like they belong and that they are going to be treated equally. So no matter the color of their skin, or no matter their gender, no matter their background. So that's how both those experiences have informed both my early life and my political career.
When you were called dyke, how did that make you feel?
Well, it made me feel indignant and angry that kind of attack was okay. And this was at a time I was getting ready to run for school trustee. And in fact, when I ran for school trustee the first time in 1994, there was a whole smear campaign about me being a radical lesbian and all this stuff. I mean, it was part of the campaign against me when I ran in 1994. So that anger that I felt and that sort of that indignation that I felt really carried me into understanding that this was going to be a fight, that I was going to have a real fight on my hands in the community, but more broadly.
Was there any part of you that thought maybe I shouldn't make my sexual orientation a big deal, or I should hide it or not talk about it because it's...
Well, I think because I was older, I think because I had lived and I was confident. I mean, I wasn't an 11-year-old, but what I did think was, man, if I were 11 years old and somebody were calling me that, I'd go so far in the closet, I'd be so frightened, about what would happen to me. But I think at that moment, I thought, okay, I've got a real responsibility because I am confident, because I am, I know that I'm safe in the world. I have a real responsibility to make sure that I do everything I can to make the world safer for kids and other people, because it's not just kids who are afraid. I mean, there are people who are older than me who haven't come out to their families, who don't go home at holiday time because they can't bring their partners. I mean, it is so painful. And when, I'll just tell you a quick story. Jane and I, one of the volunteer things we did when I was younger was we raised money for the Lesbian, Gay, Bi Youth Line, which is a distress line for young LGBTQ kids. And we did it by running a dance for women. And so we had women of all ages come from all over Ontario, actually. There were women who would drive from Owen Sound to come to Toronto on a Saturday night to go to this dance. And we called it MAD for dancing. And so I felt that I needed to do everything I could to support people who were feeling that they had to be hidden. And what we discovered through doing this dance was all these middle-aged and older than middle-aged women who their whole lives, their whole teaching careers or their whole nursing careers, their whole lives, they had been closeted. And that's a sad, sad thing. And I don't want another generation to have to live like that.
What do you say to that 11-year-old girl or these young girls who are being called these kind of names?
Well, on both these. So whether you're being sidelined because you're a girl, or whether you're being sidelined because you're a lesbian, or or you're not, and you just present in a different way. I would just say, try to find the people who support you. Try to talk to people who love you and who can give you a perspective. Try to understand that hateful language that comes at you comes because of something that's happening to that person. It's not about you, it's about that person. And our job is to understand that and to try to demonstrate to people who feel that way or feel that anger that it's unfounded, that really it's not threatening to play with a girl, and it's not threatening to be in a classroom with someone who may be struggling with their sexuality.
Premier, is Ontario becoming less tolerant? I mean, is what's happening in the States and other places in the world, is it really impacting us here? There's a lot of people who come from minority communities who say they feel, more targeted than they did even 10 years ago. It's almost like there was that discrimination in different ways, and then it kind of went away, and now we're seeing it again, or maybe it always existed.
I think that what's happened is that it didn't go away. But I think what we were getting to was a pretty strong consensus that those kinds of hateful behaviors were unacceptable. We can't control what people think, but we can have social norms that dictate respectful behavior. And that's always what I felt when I was working in schools, that we just need to set a code of behavior for a school or a family or a community that dictates certain behaviors are okay and certain are not. Of course, we want you to think this through, and we want you to think in a certain way and be open and accepting, but we can't control that. But what we can say is these behaviors are unacceptable. I fear that what's happened over the last few years is that there's been permission given to move in the other direction, to give permission for expression of that hatred. And maybe it's healthier that we see it. Maybe it's healthier that we see it for all its ugliness and we find ways to deal with it. But you know, I'm feeling a bit anxious right now, along with the people who you're talking about, that and when I say we, what's gone on in the United States and in other parts of the world, that there's an unleashing of some of that hatred, and we've got to be vigilant. You know, there are groups right here in Ontario, who subscribe to a philosophy of hatred, and who believe that divisiveness is acceptable. And we've got to be vigilant about that. We've got to be very clear that that's not the kind of society that we are building here in Ontario, that we are going to do everything that we can, whether as individual citizens or whether as politicians. We're going to do everything we can to make sure that this is a safe place, that it's a fair place, that it's a place of opportunity for everyone, no matter who they are.